Welcome back, everyone. It is week 2 of From the Stands College Football Game Day Show. I am Brian McCardle. Joined alongside me this week, Andy Hopper, Tom Scavetta again. Tom, we'll start with you. How are you doing after that loss this week?
It doesn't feel like your typical 0-1 because of who we lost to, and the fact that the Irish were able to hold the lead for for majority of this game. I was impressed for the most part. I was not impressed with the conservative offense, though, by Notre Dame, but we'll talk about that at a later time. That makes me scratch my head a little bit, but overall, I'm feeling good, Brian. Thank you very much for having me, and Andy as well. I'm looking forward to chopping it up with both of you guys tonight. Big night for you as well, BMAC, your
Yep.
UCF Knights in action.
Andy, I didn't realize last week that you guys were playing during the show. Illinois, I made maybe a little bit of a jinx on that when I said if the season were to come to an end, you guys might be in the title game. You guys took an L, unfortunately, but you're favored again this week. How you feeling?
I don't know how the hell we're favored. Virginia absolutely spanked us last year when we played them. Maybe it has something to do with the new head coach. I guess I'm not super familiar with Virginia's team, if I'm being honest. But yeah, last week fucking hurt. I don't know if you saw it, but Brian Hightower definitely caught that ball. He caught the ball twice. I don't know how that wasn't called a touchdown. Um, that would have put Illinois up by technically 1 point. They wouldn't have had to worry about the Indiana touchdown. They would have won, but I'm not so much bitter about that. It's because they just played like dog shit in the second half. They turned the ball over 3 times, including one on downs on a 4th-and-goal play where everybody in the building, the defense knew exactly what was coming, a run up the middle, and they still tried to do another run up the middle, and Chase Brown just got absolutely stuffed. Tommy DeVito threw a pick in the red zone. We had a couple fumbles like on Indiana side of the field. So Illinois once again, shocker, shoots himself in the foot, shoots himself out of a win. But looking forward to the rest of the season. I mean, especially with the NFL being back, it's the best time of the year. No matter if it's Illinois playing or whoever, it's just college football. There's nothing like it. So I'm ecstatic to be here, Brian. Thank you again for having me.
Of course. We'll start, like always, with our quick weekly recap. Tom, besides that big matchup between Ohio State and Notre Dame, what other games caught your eye there? What was interesting to you?
I'll go with the obvious one. It's Florida taking down Utah in the swamp, 29-26. 15 fourth quarter points for the Gators. Anthony Richardson balling out, 106 rushing yards and 3 TDs. It was a good offensive matchup, especially late in the game. Utah tight end Brant Kuth had 9 catches for 105 yards and a score, and I liked what their running back Tavion Thomas did, 115 yards and a touchdown as well. Cam Rising struggled a little bit. Kentrell Miller should have had the game-ending pick. Unfortunately, Utah was able to drive down the field. My buddy was actually at this game. He was caught on live national television sitting in the red zone, one of those blue and orange Gators fans screaming. And, quite frankly, the Gators jumping up to number 12 in the AP
Yeah.
poll, just 4 spots behind my Irish. Although I will say it wasn't a good week for quarterbacks. Most quarterbacks, I should say. I think a lot of players still getting their feet wet. Richardson first game as a starter. I mean, I don't even want to talk about Buchner. Starts 8 for 8, finishes 10 for 18. So there you go. Everybody struggled this week. It seemed there were very few quarterbacks that just had insane performances. So that was my little theme for week 1, I'd say.
All right. What about you, Andy?
I mean, there's one that sticks out to me, and I think it's already the game of the year. It's App State, North Carolina. That was one of the craziest football games I have ever seen. Total of 62 points scored in the fourth quarter alone, 40 of those by App State. They scored 40 points in one quarter, and they still lost. 63-61 final. App State with multiple opportunities. It was the Undertaker gif like that entire fourth quarter. I think North Carolina was up by 3 scores at one point in the second half, and App State battles all the way back. Multiple opportunities to tie the game. So they score a touchdown, miss on a 2-point conversion to take the lead. They kick an onside. North Carolina takes that back for a touchdown. App State gets the ball back. This is all with like less than a minute left, by the way. App State gets the ball back, scores another touchdown, needs a 2-point conversion to tie the game, and Chase Bryce comes up 1 yard short. It just such an agonizing finish if you're an App State fan, but a crazy game that I will not forget for quite a while. UNC, Drake May, 24 for 36, 352 yards and 4 touchdowns. Their leading receiver, Kobe Paysauer. Oh, what a name. That's awesome. 8 receptions for 92 yards and a touchdown. They had 4 different receivers catch touchdown passes. 3 different players run in for a rushing touchdown, including Drake May. So quite a day for him. App State, Chase Bryce, 25 for 38, 361 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Nate Noel had a day on the ground, 14 carries, 116 yards, and 2 tutties. Deshaun Davis led them in the air, 6 receptions, 72 yards, and a touchdown. So this was just absolutely everything you could ever want in a football game, unless you were me that bet on App State and they ended up losing. But God, I love football. This was a great game. It's going to be tough to live up to this one the rest of the season, but I'm sure somebody might.
Speaking of bets, before I get to my, well, I have 2 games, but one specifically kind of screwed you over, Tom. You sent us that parlay, that spicy 14 parlay that you put together last week. You had LSU on the card, the Sunday night action, blocked extra point. I know you had, I think Cincinnati did you in too by like half a point. But yeah, that LSU FSU game.
Classic pass rusher on this Arkansas
maybe
team.
One of the funniest ways to start a season. Obviously, both of those teams reeling a little bit, last couple seasons. They're trying to get back into their elite territory that everyone knows where they were. Burrow's not there anymore. Coach O's gone. So a little bit of a rebuild for LSU, but just an incredible way to end that game. And then secondly, shit on him all the time. Bo Nix couldn't get anything done for Oregon. 49-3, just an absolute whooping by Georgia on national television. Is the Pac-12 dead already? I don't know. We'll find out. I think we have some Pac-12 action on the game day card this week, so we'll see. But yeah, Oregon as a team is they're done and dusted already. I don't see Bo Nix getting anything done with that Oregon team. So I think it's going to be a rough season for them. And then obviously, Tom, I will say, even though you guys took that loss, I thought your defense looked really, really good. I know Njigba got injured. They weren't full first team out there, but your defense looked really good. So if the ESPN predictions were right that you still have about a 90% chance to get in with that loss, I think you guys are still looking pretty good. Moving to our first segment of the week, we're talking long-term investments. We're not talking GameStop. We're not talking option plays here. No gambling. These are long-term investments from 3 of the biggest schools in the nation. They have 6 of the last 8 national championships. Earlier this week, Dabo Swinney was announced for a 10-year, $115 million contract. This follows the recent extensions for Saban at 8 years, $93.6 million, and Kirby Smart 10-year, $112.5 million. So I'll ask you guys, of the 3, obviously 3 top-tier coaches, maybe 3 of the best in the entire nation, who you think is the best investment for these schools going forward with these very, very long contracts? Tom, we'll start with you.
I'll come out and say I think it's Kirby Smart. I think it's Kirby Smart because he's only 46. He's only 46 years old, has a deal through 2031, and he'll be making roughly between 10 and 12 million per season. And through 7 seasons with Georgia, he's 66-15. That's my pick because when I look at Nick Saban, he's going to be 79 by the end of that contract, right? His deal is pushed out through 2029. And on average, his new contract gives him close to 12 million per season. And I just think, not that it's a spooky contract at all, it's a great contract. I just think, he'll be 71 on Halloween. And then you look at Dabo Swinney, 10 years, $115 million contract extension, 15 seasons at the helm, 2 national championships. That's great. Clemson plays in the ACC, though, right? If you're Georgia, an SEC team, when you find a diamond in the rough like Kirby Smart, you want to lock him up long term. Georgia is a factory for defensive playmakers, and they've been outstanding at doing that over the past several years.
All right, what about you, Andy?
I mean, he absolutely took the words out of my mouth. I was going to go with Kirby Smart. I mean, he's a young guy. He's one of the only guys recently that's proven that his team can really stack up to Alabama and beat them when it matters, not just in the regular season, but in the national championship game. The way he recruits at such a high level is absolutely insane. Yeah, I go Kirby Smart in Georgia here. I think Tom really nailed it.
All right, well, before I get to mine, I'll ask you guys then, since that was a pretty easy pick for both of you, who do you think is the worst of the three? Tom?
The one that just happened with Dabo Swinney, because you don't know what direction Clemson is headed in, right? 15 seasons, 2 national championships. That's nothing compared to what Nick Saban has done. And Kirby Smart is just getting started. It took him a couple years to gain some traction, but now Georgia's consistently going to be in the conversation every year. And it's hard to bet against the coaches for Georgia and Alabama, right? So I would argue Swinney is the worst one. Is it a terrible deal? No, it's not. But at the end of the day, I can't go against Nick Saban either.
All right, Andy, who's the worst for you?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Swinney. I think, since they've won that last national championship, it's been kind of just a slow decline for the program. I do still think they are one of the elite and blue blood programs in college football. But yeah, I also I don't really like Dabo that much. I think he's kind of a douchebag. But other than that, yeah, I'm gonna go Dabo.
All right, well, we've got a clean sweep for every which way here, because I also think Smart is the best value here, and Dabo is the worst. Like you said, Tom, this is already Dabo's 15th season with Clemson, and even though he's been there that long, to me it feels like he's the least, I guess, glued to the team in terms of coach-school pairing compared to Saban and Kirby Smart. Um, I can see him. I don't think there's any chance he gets through this entire 10-year new contract, so I don't know why it was so long. Maybe just, as an option if things somehow go really, really well against all expectations. But I don't see that happening. What I thought was interesting was that as a part of that clause for his new contract, very specifically, if Dabo Swinney leaves to Alabama starting at the end of, or during the season, or at the end, I guess, he would owe Clemson $9 million, $6 million if he goes to any other team. But Alabama gets the higher payout there, and then if he goes to the NFL, there's no payout. So this is like their chance of saying, all right, you've got the easier division, just don't fuck us and go to Alabama, because like you guys said, Saban's getting old. He's already 70, and to me, I think his contract, it's not good or bad. It's I would call it neutral. He's got 8 more years. Will he last till he's 78? I mean, I think he can. I don't know if he wants to. He's accomplished everything he could ever dream of. But if you're Alabama, obviously you make that contract, you make that offer, knowing you're probably going to get a few more national championships. Saban will sail off into the sunset when he decides it's time. I think at the very most, this is his last contract. Like, I don't see him extending beyond this 8 years. But yeah, for me, Kirby Smart is, I think, the very obvious one, mainly because of his age. Like you guys said, he brought Georgia their first title since like the early 80s. That's a school that expects to be elite, and from 1980 to 2017, that's a long ass time. So he's a Saban assistant, He started 2007, I think was their first year. He followed the very first year Saban started at Alabama. He went along with him, got promoted to DC the very next year. So a lot of Alabama's early success in their comeback with Saban was due on the defensive side to Kirby Smart. So I think he's an extremely nice choice. He played for the Dogs, so he's got the loyalty, and he's 67-15 at Georgia, and a third of those came in the first year during his sort of rebuild. So he's done pretty much everything they could have asked for him up to this point. To me, it's hands down. It's got to be Kirby Smart as the best investment of these three. Moving on to our next segment, we're going to do a little overrated, underrated. I'm going to call out some teams that we think are way too overrated and some that are too underrated. I will say the AP poll took care of probably the obvious one for us, Oregon, after getting smashed. Got body slammed outside of the entire top 25 of the AP poll. Andy, we'll start with you. Who's your most overrated team in college football right now?
Kind of went a little back and forth on this. But I guess I don't understand why Michigan is number 4. I mean, yeah, they won they put up 51 points, but they're playing Colorado State. Like, I don't know. Also, I don't think Clemson is number 5 in the country either. That offense was anemic. Of course, they ended up putting up 41 points, but it was a very rough start to that game. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Michigan as my most overrated team right now. As far as underrated, this is a team that I talked about heavily last season. I'm running it back. The Roadrunners of UTSA. Rank them, you cowards. Frank Harris is back. His number 1 receiver, Josh Cephas, is back as well. Obviously, a new offensive coordinator after Barry Loney Jr. left to come up to Illinois here in Champaign to be the Illini's offensive coordinator. They gave Houston a hell of a game. That was a game we didn't really talk about.
Triple overtime.
In the recap, but yeah, triple overtime. Houston does end up winning 37-35, but it was a heck of a fight from the Roadrunners. I'm excited to see, what they kind of put together this season. So they are my currently most underrated team. It's tough. I need more weeks of the season to really give you my best answer.
Well, yeah, it was supposed to be on the card last week, but you guys know how much I hate preseason rankings, so
right.
Felt it'd be a little better to do this week. Tom, give us your overrated and underrated.
So I guess to piggyback off of Andy, I also have Michigan. McNamara puts up very pedestrian numbers, and that seems to continue. They rely on Blake Corum and their new number 2 running back because Hassan Haskins got drafted this past offseason. So now you're in a situation where, the running game continues to carry the offense. And I'm not saying Michigan's a bad team. They're still going to be in the conversation. Are they going to make the college football playoff again? I don't think so. You don't have a game changer on the defensive side of the ball right now. You lost Daxton Hill, Aiden Hutchinson, and David Ojabo, respectively. I just think number 4 is way too high because of the nature of this offense. The running game carries it. Michigan's defense is not as dominant as it was last year, and that's why they're my most overrated team. I would have them more in the 7 to 8 range max right now. You think McNamara's numbers, and I hate to, bash this kid because I do like the way he plays the game. His numbers aren't very appealing. You went up against Colorado State, and your numbers still were like, I'm not so sure. Underrated? I'm going to go with the team that proved me wrong last week here on this show. Brian will appreciate this. The Arkansas Razorbacks scoring 31 points on Cincinnati's defense. And they only moved up, I believe, 3 spots to number 16, something along that range. And I think they have a well-balanced offense with Jefferson as their QB. They only allowed 2 sacks, and Arkansas had only 1 turnover. So it goes to show you they took care of the football. They protected their quarterback, gave him time to throw, and it was an all-around effort where Cincinnati was at least 6 to 7 points behind throughout majority of the football game. That's not something Cincinnati is really used to doing. Now, I know it's a different Bearcats team from last year, but I mentioned Arkansas partially due to the fact, too, because I was out for dinner watching this game on TV and thinking throughout the entire meal why I decided to pick the Bearcats on from the stands. Yet here I am saying Arkansas is my underrated team right now. But like Andy said, 1 week in, I mean, you're picking at feathers here, but give me the Hogs for now.
Love to hear that. Yeah, for me, overrated. I almost went with Michigan as well. Uh, if for nothing else, the fact that they still have not sorted out that god awful QB situation. I mean, the QBs. First of all, I don't think you say if you want to be an elite team that's getting into the playoff. I don't think you say just before week 1 starts. Yeah, we've already settled. Guy A is going to start week 1. Guy B is going to start week 2. If if McCarthy plays good, you continue to play him, right? If he plays like shit, then you put McNamara in. I don't know why you're splitting this early. You had an entire offseason to figure this out. They tried the dual thing last year. How do you not know by this time, who your guy is? So just make a decision. But instead, I'm going with Clemson. They struggled again against Georgia Tech. I don't know if Georgia Tech just has their number. They only beat them 14-8 last season. But Georgia Tech has one of the worst defenses in all of college football last year, and it looks like this year again. And they held Clemson. It was a one-score game with 1 minute remaining in the third quarter, and that would be they sold out on a blitz. Missed a tackle on DJ, and that's when the score started to get out of hand. But you can't be 7 points up on a team that runs a triple option with the 105th or whatever it is worst defense in all of college football. And expect to be a top team. So why they're as high as they are, I don't know. I think they're going to continue to drop a few places. Even if they get these wins, I think these other teams are going to show out. I think Texas A&M will probably pass them. Oklahoma, Notre Dame when they get some big wins above them, and then my underrated team as well, USC. I think they'll end up passing them. They got so many transfer pieces. It's so weird talking good about a Pac-12 team. For once, but I just love the situation they're in. I know they only played Rice. Rice is god awful, but everything pretty much went according to plan. The team is just so loaded with transfer talent. They've got Lincoln Riley, who I think is a fantastic coach. Oklahoma fans are, probably going to be out for blood. I'm kind of hoping both those two teams get into the playoffs, make things a little bit spicier. But yeah, Caleb Williams played in a fantastic game, spread the ball around. 6 guys had at least 2 catches. So at this point, my only question going into this week into the season was, how is their defense going to hold up? First game, they did pretty much everything you could ask of them. Both Rice tried 2 QBs on them, 0 touchdowns combined, 4 interceptions. So if that secondary can continue to play lights out, we might have a playoff team on our hands. Move on to our games of the week. It is our Shots and Chasers, your roadmap to college game day. We'll start it off with our noon game, Alabama taking on Texas, who has been trying to be back for the last decade, it seems like. Andy, we'll start with you. What are we going to see in this game?
I don't know. Honestly, the spread is Bama minus 20.5, so essentially 3 scores. Have we seen this Alabama team absolutely beat up on inferior opponents in the past? Yes. But let's think about a couple times last season. There was the LSU game that they only won by 2. They barely beat a really bad Florida team by 2. So I don't know. This is going to be a huge spot for Texas. It's Big Nude Saturday on Fox, with my boy Gus Johnson on the call. Ha ha! I'm really excited to see Quinn Ewers. Me and Tom were talking before we started that we're both pretty high on Bryce Young this year. The saying goes, you don't get rich betting against Alabama. So I think I'm going to go with the Tide here. But I wouldn't hate to see a Texas upset in this matchup, to be honest with you. I think just the most intriguing thing for me is how is Texas going to handle Will Anderson on the Alabama defensive side of the ball, and how is Quinn Ewers going to look? Is this hype surrounding this guy real? So yeah, big game for Texas. I think it's going to be some pretty awesome uniform visuals with the burnt orange up against Alabama, especially in down in Austin. They're going to be going wild, I'm sure. So I'm going to pick Alabama to win. I don't know if I necessarily think they cover though.
All right, Tom.
Yeah, it's an interesting game, right? Because you have two great young, talented QBs. But remember, Quinn Ewers is just scratching the surface right now, as where Bryce Young has already won a Heisman. He had 6 total touchdowns last week, 5 through the air, on top of 100 rushing yards. They have a new great receiver in Holden that I really like, who had 2 touchdown catches. To make this short and sweet, I think Texas is a good football team, but at the end of the day, roll tide. Alabama's going to win. Although I do agree with what Andy said. It will be closer than people think. Texas is a tough place to play.
They barely beat them. Yeah.
Well, when it comes down to the Cocks and the Hogs, I look at two different things, okay? I look at the way they move the football down the field. They ran through Cincinnati's throat last week, right? KJ Jefferson and Raheem Sanders are both outstanding threats. Bumper Pool, again, another video game character type of name, had 13 tackles last week, and Cincinnati really couldn't do much offensively. If they took care of Cincinnati, what makes me think they're going to lose at home to Arkansas? They're not, and they're covering that 8.5 point spread. Spencer Rattler did not look good last week. He threw 2 interceptions and was sacked 3 times. I like the Hogs a lot. Give me Arkansas by 14 to 20 points.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I agree. I'm also taking the Hogs. This is a classic cock hog matchup that you are. I mean, I want to say that you're not going to want to miss, but I'd rather be watching the Alabama Texas game personally. But I love KJ Jefferson. I actually had Arkansas minus 6.5 last week. I love Tom getting bold with the 14-20 prediction. I am not super sold on South Carolina. I'm not super sold on Spencer Rattler. I think he's going to have an even tougher time on Saturday against an Arkansas defense that I would presume is a lot better than whoever the hell they played in week one, whatever cupcake that was. But we'll see. We'll see. But I'm going to take Arkansas as well. I'm with Tom on this one. So, I mean, the talk about Tennessee is the absolute electric offense led by Hendon Hooker, who I think maybe could be a dark horse Heisman guy, depending on how highly rated Tennessee can get if they can get hot this year. If you look at Pitt, you talk about what they were able to do, uh, inch out that win versus West Virginia on that tipped pick six. I thought Keaton Slovis looked pretty good. I think this will be another test for him with this Tennessee defense. Anytime you play an SEC opponent, I think it's going to be a tough game. Uh, this one's really a toss-up for me. I'm going to go with Tennessee. I think Tennessee gets it done here.
And it's interesting, Andy says that Tennessee is 6-point favorites on the road, even though they're ranked 7 spots lower than Pittsburgh. That doesn't really make sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh's defense had 3 sacks last week in the backyard brawl. Keaton Slovis, good job replacing Kenny Pickett, still getting his feet wet after transferring from USC. But Andy talked about Hendon Hooker and what he was able to do last week. And I think, quite frankly, Tennessee is going to have a really good game offensively. I think it might. This game does have shootout potential to it. Slovis is no slouch by any means. I think it's going to come down to one possession. I don't know if Tennessee covers the spread. I think 6 points on the road against another ranked team is a little generous, but I do think the Volunteers wind up finding a way to win this game. Now, they did lose, remember, Velus Jones in the draft to Andy Chicago Bears. And then you look at, what they lost on the defensive side of the ball. A couple key players here and there, Alante Taylor to name one. But other than that, they have a lot of pieces in place from last year. So, Volunteers it is. SEC, ACC. I mean, got to go with the SEC team, right?
Yeah, it's interesting you said that because I quoted Narduzzi before this game, and he basically said, "You heard all summer about the SEC, and that there's only 2 Power 5 conferences in the country: the SEC and the Big Ten. So we're in the Pee Wee League, and we're going to see if we can line up and play." Yeah, this game is a bit of a toss-up to me. The tune-up games, Pitt looked really good. Slovis, I think, has been a great replacement. I mean, I know it's only one game, but he looked really good. Everyone's known about him for years. He's been highly rated coming out of USC. Tennessee didn't really have much of, that quality, I guess, in the first week tune-up. It seemed like this year, typically we get a week 1 tune-up from most teams, and then week 2 is kind of like bump it up a little bit in quality, but it seems like this year all the teams have a lot of cupcakes in starting just from week 1. So Tennessee might still be a little rusty if Pitt comes at them a little bit harder than Ball State did. Yeah, I'm trusting Pitt here. I'll just go against the grain a little bit, and I'll take the Panthers and Narduzzi. Still riding that high from Pitt's performance last year, so I'm going with the Panthers. And then in our chaser slot, we have in-state rivalry. It's going to get dirty. We got Iowa Hawkeyes taking on the Iowa State Cyclones. Andy, we'll start with you. Who do you like in this game?
Well, depends on who's going to show up on offense for the Hawkeyes. I believe Petrus had 109 yards last week. I mean, the Hawkeyes' best player was their punter, Torrey Taylor. They ended up with 2 safeties and a field goal. It's the first time in Division I history, I believe, that a team has scored 7 points without scoring a touchdown. I want to pick Iowa State. Recent history in this rivalry is telling me not to. Iowa always seems to come out with these matchups as of late, even if they don't play all that well. But I'm thinking to myself, there's just like no way that they don't score a touchdown again in week 2, right? I've got a good buddy that's a really, really good, really big Hawkeye fan, and he says it's going to be we're texting back and forth the other day. He said it'll be the most Iowa thing of all time when they come out and score 35 points this weekend. I don't know if I'm going to bet I'm going to go that high. I did see a simulation of this game that somebody's doing on Twitter, where they like simmed it on NCAA 14,
Okay.
and it had Iowa winning 11-9. So 2 safeties, and I think a touchdown. No, yeah, that math checks out. So a touchdown and 2 safeties. So still not very good. Even the computer simulations are down bad on this Iowa offense. So, I mean, let's not forget they did lose like one of their anticipated top targets in Charlie Jones, who transferred over to Purdue like in the middle of the summer, kind of out of nowhere. But I guess you can't really blame him for wanting to leave an offense that's averaging just a little over 100 yards per game for an offense in Purdue that's averaging almost like 400. So, and I mean, he's been Jones was Aiden McConnell's number 1 target for most of that Penn State game. So, anyway, for this one, I'm gonna pick the Hawkeyes because it just feels like a game that they win. No matter how much I hate to do it, it just feels like a game that they win.
Yeah, if there is any reason to transfer to another team, it's probably you have Spencer Petras thrown to you. So I don't blame him on that one. Tom, who are you taking?
Let's talk about the Cyclones for a second, right? Heading into this game. Hunter Deckers and Xavier Hutchinson look like they've known each other for 10 years. The way they sync and gel on offense is remarkable. Deckers had 4 touchdown passes this week. I'm going to go out a limb and say that he's already better than Brock Purdy was. Look, this offense is missing Breece Hall this year. He's in the NFL now. That's going to hurt. But Xavier Hutchinson had 3 touchdowns last week. That's somebody you can lean on. But the question is, will the Hawkeyes take him away? I think they will. Spencer Petras is still the same player, Andy. He's not a good college QB, but the 4 sacks defensively kept them upright last week. Picking Iowa, but reluctantly picking Iowa. This is not a convincing pick. This is a reluctant pick. You know, it looked like Andy and I studied from the same book before we hopped on the show today. It's never a good thing.
It's not often you get Tom and I's brain on the same page. It
Right.
just really doesn't happen. It's pretty rare. So let's all relish in it and appreciate it.
3.5 line, by the way, in our favor.
Well, I guess I'll be the one to break it again. You guys are just agreeing too much this week. Listen, Spencer Petras had a 1.1 QB rating last week. A 1.1. That offense is non-existent. I think they said this is the first time in history that a team has only scored 7 points via a field goal, safety. So I don't know where do they expect offense to come from. Iowa State's got a pretty good D line here. They're known for their defense. You know, Iowa kind of is as well, but at least Iowa State, you know, can put up points. I think Deckers is going to have a great season for them. So for me, I'm going with the Cyclones. To just go against the grind, but I can't. In my heart of hearts, I can't pick a team that put up a field goal and 2 safeties against South Dakota State last week. So I'm taking the Cyclones. We'll move into our 7:30 slot. We got a pretty spicy matchup here. Florida, who is flying up the rankings after a phenomenal performance, especially by Mr. Anthony Richardson, who has finally won the starting job, taking on Kentucky. This game gets dirty a lot. Tom, we'll start with you on this one. Is the Gators' talent going to take them over the Wildcats here, or do the Wildcats pull a few dirty tricks on the Gators and pull an upset?
The Swamp is a very hostile environment. I don't care who you are, but this quarterback matchup is primed to be something special to watch. This is must-see TV. You have Will Levis, a guy who's projected to be drafted in the first round this year, against Anthony Richardson, a really young, promising quarterback who has NFL potential in the future himself. I mean, last week, Tavion Robinson for Kentucky was great, had 136 receiving yards, and Richardson was solid on the ground for Florida with those 3 rushing touchdowns. But ultimately, what won the game for Florida was their defense. They took a stand against Cameron Rising and the Utah Utes on that drive to seal the win. They came over a lot of adversity late, a couple flags, the Miller dropped interception, Keelan Kelly will also be visiting the Gators after decommitting from Notre Dame, making the biggest mistake of his life to go attend a game in the Swamp. 5-star defensive end recruit will be there for the Florida Gators. 6.5 seems like a bit much from a team that went unranked to number 12. I did not expect Florida to jump this high, but I guess when you beat the number 7 team in the nation, you're going to get respect. And that respect was earned. And they've also earned my pick this week. The Gators are going to win this football game.
All right, Andy.
Yeah, I agree with Tom on most of what he said. Obviously, the Swamp is a really tough place to play. Yes, they just took out who I think still is a very good Utah team. But the only thing I worry about here is, and I'm curious to see if you guys are kind of thinking what I'm thinking here, is there any hangover we see from Florida coming this week, coming off such an emotional, big upset win? And then, Brian, you said it. This rivalry gets nasty. This goes back quite a long time. Kentucky and Florida, these are two teams that don't like each other. I kind of want to go against the grain here and pick Kentucky.
Ooh.
I really like Will Levis. I thought Anthony Richardson was incredibly impressive last week. I think the Gators come out. I think they come out a little sloppy. I think they're hungover, a little emotional from the win last week. Maybe partied a little bit too hard after that. Yeah, I'm gonna take the Wildcats. I might regret it, but I'm gonna take the Wildcats.
Yeah, so I mean, the dirty play here is one of those things that it's kind of like the great equalizer in a rivalry like this. There was that linebacker a few years ago who twisted. Oh God, who's the QB that the Bucks drafted? Trask. Sorry, couldn't think of his name. He got caught on national television trying to twist and break his ankle, and that's, they all said after the game that it's like dozens of plays like that happen in this rivalry. So, it's you kind of throw all the stats out the window, but it's so hard to do that when Florida had such a fantastic game against Utah. I don't think we really know. Utah maybe would have been one of my overrated teams for our earlier segment. Had they won, just barely squeak out the win last week. Just because I'm not sure. 7 was really high for them. But regardless, it was a great win for the Gators. And they just looked good on both sides of the ball. So they kept rising reasonably, held down. I think this is going to be such a close one, and I think the Swamp is going to be that little edge the Gators take. I think it's going to be a one-score game with the Gators coming out on top because of that hometown advantage. And then moving into, this is not a 7:30 game. We're going late into the night. We have BYU taking on Baylor in a ranked versus ranked matchup. Baylor, number 9, I believe right now. Andy, we'll start with you. Who's taking this one?
I'm going Baylor, number 9 team in the country. I know they're traveling to BYU, but they're getting 3.5. I think it's like plus 120 or 130 on the money line. I'm hammering that. BYU's top 2 receivers are out for this game, and that's honestly kind of my deciding factor here. I think BYU is a good team, but I also think Baylor is kind of, how we say Texas is back. I think Baylor's a little back. Do I think they're in the conversation for a national championship? I don't know about that. Do I think they could win the Big 12? Absolutely. I'm taking Baylor on the road here. I'm getting frisky.
All right, Tom?
Just want to make it clear. Wasn't the line BYU -3? At least that's what I saw as of a couple of hours ago. Is that correct, Andy?
Yeah.
It's been shuffling between about 2.5 and 3 on and off.
Got it. So I really like Blake Shapen at quarterback for Baylor. Nobody stood out too big for them last week. Now, granted, they are the defending Big 12 champions. Their defense has now forced a turnover in 23 straight games, and BYU, despite being ranked 21, despite being at home, their top 2 wide receivers are out, and they're bound to toss some turnovers. Jaron Hall had a couple of good touchdown passes last week, but I think what these injuries allow the Baylor Bears to do is focus on Christopher Brooks, who, by the way, is a very dangerous running back. He is a one-cut back who can hit the hole. The Cougars also had a defensive touchdown last week, so the Bears need to be a little bit careful. It's really tough. Like, I'm starting to think BYU here. Like, I don't know if it's going to be a great weekend for the Bears. If you live in Chicago, that is. But the Baylor Bears, they survive in a nail biter.
Tom, you told us that
There's
shot
the
was
shot.
coming pre-show.
There's the shot.
Hey, Titans cover the spread pretty easily this weekend.
Yeah.
On that, yeah.
For me, what I'll say is the Bears, it's been in their mind. It's been a concern that BYU has a great home field presence with the crowd. They've been pumping in crowd noise at their practice all week long. So when teams start doing that, you know that they've bookmarked that, way ahead of the season. That's going to be a major factor for their team. I don't know how much it helps, fake versus being in the real environment, but it's something that they were planning for. I think, especially if you like points in a matchup like this, I have to take the Bears. You're getting 2.5 for free. I think Baylor's a fantastic team. Aranda is a fantastic coach. I think he might not be there much longer. I think he's going to get a call up to a really good team. Honestly, I could see him taking over for one of Dabo or Nick Saban if whichever one leaves first from their respective teams.
Right.
Listen, they had an easy game against Albany last week. There's not really, you can't really talk much about it because
Right.
not much to do. But Chapin 17-20 did what he needed to do. And I don't know. I think this is Baylor's year. They won the conference last year. Oklahoma's still there. Texas is still there. There's all hard games, and they won the Big 12. So I'm taking the Bears here in Provo, Utah, over the Mormons. And that will do it for our show this week. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Enjoy the games this weekend. Thank you to Tom and Andy again for joining me. And we'll see you guys next week.